Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Otero County special meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order and have a roll call.
Commissioner Marquardt?
Here.
Commissioner Matherly?
Here.
Commissioner Griffin?
Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we're here today to discuss the current status of the Lincoln land management revision effort. And we're actually our coordinating agency. This is cooperating, but we want to be coordinating because that gives us a voice in this. This morning I was on a long conference call with Eddie, Chavez, Otero, and Lincoln counties, and they're all having the same issue. So we're going to try to join forces because we all kind of want the same thing out of this. So what we actually had asked Travis Mosley for was to take this designated wilderness area business out of this. So we'll see how that goes, but that's kind of what all the counties are asking for. And we're also going to start planning some meetings that we can get together and start trying to make some plans rather than being kind of left out of this whole process. So, you have anything you want to add in there?
Well, if they're going to, you said something earlier, but they were going to postpone this for a while. How long are they going to postpone
Well, he didn't give us a definite date, but he did say that probably, 60 days maybe?
Yeah,
He said the early summer.
So they said during the spring they would be considering the comments that they received and all the comments and questions they received on the draft environmental impact statement. So the springtime they'd be taking to review those, make comments and make revisions. And he was open to working with the counties and having their involvement during this period. And Congressman Harold asked for 60 to 90 days for it to be a meaningful process for the counties, so the counties could actually get into these documents and review them more thoroughly to make sure that anything that was at odds with our comprehensive plan or our ordinances, we can note that and voice it. So we've got the next 3 to 4 months to work on this.
And I know he did mention making some edits and stuff like that to the plan. I know that he did mention, Travis Mosley did mention that the letters and the comments that he had gotten from the allotment, you know, the ranchers and stuff, that's made a difference. So I'm hoping that's true, because he said that made a lot of difference. He could actually see, you know, how this affected everyone. So
did they mention, not only on the wilderness part, but did they address the grazing allotments?
we didn't even talk about that this morning. It was mainly this wilderness designation was kind of what was on everybody's mind today.
Okay.
I did today, you know. I mean, we had a lot of people on the call. I think he might have been a little surprised that we had that many people attending. And he seemed receptive, you know. And we can hope that we can all work together because, you know, we all want a good forest. We want a good, healthy forest, you know, and prescribed burns and stuff like that. I'm fine with that. But we've just got to figure this other stuff out about this designated wilderness area and how that's going to affect everybody. So I'm hoping that they'll pull that out of that plan. But I mean, this is the plan. I mean, this is what we've been reading. So it's a lot. My big concern really right now is that we're being hit from all sides from this land issue, because this designated wilderness area takes away the public's access to this land. It takes the ranchers' access from this land. Then we've got the 30 by 30 that we're going to be fighting, which is going to turn into the 50 by 50. And then now we have the land of enchantment bond that's in Santa Fe right now, which will raise property taxes so that we can give the government money to turn around and buy some more of our land. So it's just, it's got to stop somewhere. And I found this map and I thought it kind of made me want to throw up. But that red, that's federal land. This is out west. I think we've given our pound of flesh, because it is just insane how much federal land is already owned in the western states. So it's been a eye-opening experience looking at all this stuff. Did we have anybody that wanted to speak, do you know? Or do we want to wait for
I don't think anybody
Travis?
had signed in.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to go ahead and try and call it in now, Mike.
See if he's
Let's see
ready.
if we can just go ahead and get in and wait until the call.
Can we wait till 2 o'clock?
We can, yeah. But Pamela had said she wanted to start the meeting at 1:45 just so that we were kind of all ready to go.
Right,
But actually the call-in time is 2 o'clock.
okay.
And they may be, they may wait till 2 o'clock to actually kick it off.
I was just gonna wait for Commissioner Griffin if he's.
Yeah,
in.
he's on his way, so, I mean, they're not going to start the meeting till 2 o'clock, so.
Yeah, we'll just be on hold.
Yeah.
We'd be just on hold.
What time is it? What-
151. See, there's another deal that needs to come into this too, which is it's not so much on the wilderness part, but it's on the Forest Service deal. They're changing the regulations on the logging.
Welcome to the audio conference.
Used to, when you bid on a
Enter
sale,
conference ID,
you did the
followed
work,
by pound.
and you got the logs. Now you bid on a sale, all you do is do the work, deck the logs, and then they come back in and auction the logs off behind you. So what's happening right now, there's one company out of Houston that's coming in buying all the decks
If you're the meeting organizer,
Uh,
press star now.
to where there's only one really logger left, and there's 5 little mills down here, and it's gonna shut them all out of business. So
You're now joining
that,
the meeting.
that needs to be, that's one of their new rules that's starting this year. So that
And
needs
what
to
is the
be
purpose
used.
of that,
Leader to admit
do you
to the
think?
meeting.
They're getting more money. The guy from Houston is paying more for the decks than what,
Wait.
what George is decking and bidding on it, and then he's hauling the logs to these 5 mills downtown and selling the logs to, I mean, that's how he's also supplementing his income.
Right.
So they'll put them out of business because they're hauling all the logs to Houston, to whatever they're doing down there. Which I don't know how they can afford to do that, but. You know Jessie up there? The Jessie, Willett?
Mm-hmm, yeah,
She's the one that's implementing this.
Sit over here.
So if you run into her, ask her about it.
okay.
If someone asks a question and they don't hear it,
Oh, like mute and unmute, you mean?
no, just to re-ask the question.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I can handle that.
Hello, this is Otero.
Hi, this is Diane Fraser with the Lincoln National Forest.
Okay, awesome.
We'll just wait a little bit.
Sounds good. Can you hear that over there?
Mm-hmm.
Gerald, are you okay with the sound?
Yeah.
What was her name?
Diane Fraser.
Thank you.
Can't find my letters from Gary and all that.
I got some.
I don't know what happened to them. I tore that. That's why I was on the floor whenever you.
Oh,
walked
yeah?
in.
Yeah, I've got,
'Cause that was in December.
did you get this one? This is a good one.
Is that, how recent is that?
October.
Oh, I got that one, but it's with all the others that I can't find.
If you want any copies of these, we can make you copies. Okay. And I've got Gary's in here too.
They're in there, in my room, I just gotta figure out, I'm sure they're stuck in that meeting book, in that binder.
Oh, probably. This is the one from Gary. This is another one. I think this is a different one, but that's from Gary too. RB, did you find out anything about that SR 2477, about those roads?
We had talked about them last week, and it was in a different context, but I've researched them some.
Okay. You think that's going to help us at all, or?
It depends on if there's some of those roads in these areas. If there are, then it would.
Then it could. Yeah. I think that's all of them I got.
Is you and this, I didn't see on the guidelines for coordination for Lincoln National Forest. You didn't have that, or do you?
Well, here's a couple more letters too, if you want those. Yeah, I got this one.
Well, the one, this one here, which I haven't seen here, it's on the guidelines for coordination with the Lincoln National Forest. Is that what you got?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you need it for that? I'm trying to get Sylvia
No,
here.
you can copy away. Is there any way we can do anything as a county to slow those logs from leaving Otero County and heading out to Houston?
I don't think so if they buy them unless they're some quarantine or inspection deal.
No.
That's
Not that I
gonna put
know
our
of.
guys out of business, and then there's gonna be nobody up there thinning anything.
Yep.
'Cause they're not gonna be able to make a living.
But they got Harper is the one that's the front guy for the Houston farm. He's going around and throwing all this money out at them. Jamie Harper.
Mhm.
And buying them up, so when that all comes out, when George runs out of logs he's got, they're done.
So then where's this guy gonna get his logs from then?
When I talked to him a week or so ago, he said he had like 60 loads or 50 loads left or something. He said 2 months and he'll be done.
Wow.
And he won't take another sale. They got another sale, but if it's the same way, he says he won't take it. He won't do it.
Yeah.
So,
Good afternoon. This is Diane again at the Lincoln National Forest. Who do we have on the call?
Commissioner Markwart?
Commissioner Matherly?
Do you anticipate anybody else joining us?
Commissioner Griffin is here, and now R.B. Nichols is our county attorney. He's also on the call. But I think this is it.
Okay.
We don't anticipate anyone calling in.
Okay.
Diana, this is Vicki Markwart. Would you mind giving us a recap of the phone call we had with you and Travis Mosley this morning and kind of catch everybody up to
Sure.
speed on that? That might kind of help fill people in on what's going
Okay.
on.
Excellent idea. Okay, so this morning at 10, we talked with representatives from Chavez County, representatives from Yvette Harrell's office. Yvette Harrell was also on the call. We talked about Chavez County's opportunities to participate in the land management plan process. And we also specifically talked about areas of their plan and our plan where there might be a rub as far as planning goes. And they really dialed in on the issue of the eligible wilderness polygons, particularly in Chavez County. And they agreed to work with us through Margaret Barrier, I think is her name. I'll check on that real quick.
Margaret Byland.
Byfield.
Yes, exactly. They agreed to work through Margaret with us on kind of ironing out some of our conflicts and trying to come to some consensus, as much consensus as we can. And I sent her an email during the lunch breaks, trying to kick off a conversation with her, a follow-up email. And let me see, what else did we agree to? Lincoln County said that they didn't have any concerns because they have submitted comments. Let's see. And I think that's where we ended, agreeing to work through Margaret to do some coordination.
Okay, and do you know about the extended time that we asked for?
That was left pretty loosely. I also did a follow-up email with our contractor to send me the most up-to-date schedule that they've been tracking. But I don't want it to drag on. I believe, Travis, what was your opinion on the amount of time?
Well, yeah, I was going to offer that. I did kind of frame that up in the time frame of a couple of months to coincide with our ongoing work. At this point, we're kind of between the draft environmental impact statement, the draft plan that's associated with it, and moving towards finalizing that plan. And so we're in the process of evaluating comments, so it makes sense that we strive to kind of incorporate and weave in the interests from Otero, well, from all of the county governments, but, especially Chavez and Otero that have spoken out, they want to have some opportunity and gave voice to the idea that there are differences between our respective plans, and when Diane spoke to, it's my words, right, is we're trying to get at the specifics of that. What really are we talking about here in terms of the differences that we need to try and iron out and incorporate into the plan, or if there is unreconcilable conflict, we want to try and sort through that as best we can and address it, but knowing that it may not be entirely addressed to everyone's satisfaction. But so that's, rather than, we don't want to get caught up in suspending operations here and moving, and having this drag out for another year or anything like that. I think this is a really good time in the process to get at the meat and potatoes of what the concerns are and what your interests are. And I recognize that wilderness designation, or the wilderness proposed designation that's in our proposed action, is one of those things that are obvious. And we had some really good information provided by those permittees that are affected by that. They've got allotments out there in that New Canyon country and that area, so they provided us really good detailed information about built infrastructure and the need to ongoing maintenance of that, not just their allotment, but power lines and mining adits and roads, a whole bunch of things that really influence my thinking about its suitability for wilderness. So that was really good in terms of having some real site-specific information. But if there's other things, we want to capture those and try to address those as best we can.
What's the best way, if we have citizens that still want to contact you, what's the best way to do that if they want to send in their concerns?
Diane, they can continue to do that, for one. They can send information to me, or through me, or probably best to send directly to Diane, because we got a team of folks working through those comments and trying to address them. I know we have a deadline that we put forth out there, but that's not to say that we're not willing to listen to important information nonetheless as we work through this comment period.
And how would they contact Diane? Through an email or a
Yes,
website?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'm still in telework status, so I do get over to the office, but not super regular. It is diane.prather@usda.gov.
And any form of written comment is very helpful to us in the sense that we've got it captured and we can bring it into our analysis of comments as we evaluate those and determine how we're going to adjust and incorporate those kinds of comments into the final draft forest plan and environmental impact statement.
Travis, can I say something? Personally, it's this opportunity is really important to me to be working with the counties. The general public, it's just my opinion, the general public has had ample opportunity to submit comments. So I'm, at this point, really concerned about the county's plan and our plan.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's true.
Go ahead. Travis, this is Corey Griffin. It's nice to hear your voice. It's really, I feel like a shame that it's come to this. You know, as you've been, as the county has reached out to you and tried to get you to respond, and we have had no response from you. But if you consider back, Travis, whenever this forest plan, whenever you guys first started constructing it, I believe the consensus of the commission at that time was that we wanted to be engaged on the ground floor of this plan, not to be offered a chance to comment after you guys already come up with the plan that's going to directly affect our ranchers and our allotment owners and such. Because, you know, if the Forest Service had the right level of respect, y'all would have again included us on the ground floor of it and have been engaged with us through the process, because as you know as well as I do, this is going to directly negative impact the constituents and the ranchers of our county negatively. So, you know, I've got a problem with it from the beginning of it, and I don't know. I mean, it's really. I wish you were present here in the meeting today, but I guess it's easier for this to take place over the phone for y'all. I don't know.
Well, you know, we're trying to get the interests met here, Coy, and you know, we can talk about whether or not we have been effective in our processes of getting information and getting feedback from essentially the nation here. But really, locally, as I get it, you know, we've had ample opportunities, ample meetings and open houses. Have we sat down face to face with the county and the county only? No, we haven't, and nor has the county until now really kind of come up and given this voice of, hey, we're here and we don't feel like we've been included. So while I appreciate there's, you know, all of that in the past is that, and we're trying to capture this right now, right? Now is the time, and it's probably the best time frame for it to happen, because now you see we're not just talking, you know, broad philosophies about what's going on. We've put forth a proposed action that has very tangible things that you can look at and respond to, both positive and negatively, in terms of how we're approaching that. And so, you know, at this point, there's been a lot of, you know, we've had other counties, you know, lots of other entities that have provided us great feedback where they leaned into it and they gave it to us. And we've talked with them, we've met with them, they've requested meetings. We've been right here. And so we want to continue to be here, because as I mentioned in our meeting with Chavez County, it's not so much we want to just get to a decision here and get through this process. You know, as I put it, it's not about a fast decision, it's about a good decision. And I recognize that there are things that we can agree to in our respective planning efforts, and there are probably going to be some things that we don't. And okay, we'll try and sort those out, but, you know, let's surface them and have some good conversation about that. And so, you know, over the next couple of months, we're hoping to work with Margaret Highfield as their kind of liaison, and that's who I'm looking for here, to how you guys want to help us to narrow in on what are the real key issues here that we need to, you feel we need to adjust on. obviously the wilderness is one of them, but is there more? Is there something else that you see? There's a rub here with the way your plan, the county plan plays out, and where we're either contradictory or there's something that's at odds with that. So then we can focus on, okay, what do we do about that, right?
So Travis, this is R.B. Nichols, the county attorney. We sent you, like Travis County, we sent you a coordination agreement in December. Is that something that the Forest Service is willing to work on us with, establishing set parameters for how our respective entities are going to coordinate on this and going forward? That way we have a seat at the table and are able to voice our opinions, and we're communicating. We have open lines of communication.
Yeah, we could, I'll tell you this, and it's a bureaucratic answer, and I apologize for it up front, is we've got our own kind of requirements there. That MOU, we certainly understand what you're trying to get at there is the seat at the table and ongoing, not just about the forest plan, but about ongoing stuff, how we go about doing that. In that spirit, certainly, I want to do that. There may be some format, and, we have required verbiage that has to go into those. It's not just something I go off and sign. I've got to work through a whole set of legal eagles that look at this and put our stamp in there. So I think the intent and the spirit of that, I'm certainly committed to. And so we may have to work through, the format and standard verbiage that we require of our agreements or MOUs. But beyond that, I see no reason why we can't commit to working on things on an ongoing basis. And if a MOU with the appropriate signatures are on there, that's great. I think it documents our intentions. So, yeah.
Roy, I don't know if this would be a question for you or for Travis, but I'd like to know this forest plan, if there's not an MOU in place between the county and the Forest Service in regards to this forest plan, would it be legal to implement it if we didn't have a MOU in place?
The Forest Service is required by law to coordinate with us and communicate with us and
we come to a mutual understanding.
Either understanding, or we note the areas where we disagree, and then a higher level reviews them, and ultimately Congress sees those areas where we disagree and makes a decision.
So if the way this current forest plan is written right now, if there is a majority of commissioners that say this isn't going to work, we're not going to accept this, then we have a standoff then, and they can't implement this plan unless we are agreeable to it, correct?
That would, Congress could enact something.
But it would take an act of Congress.
Yes. That's
Okay.
the ultimate sign off on this.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, if I'll offer, and I'm not a lawyer, and so I'm not gonna profess to interpret law, but I have some experience in seeing how this plays out. So, we've got our administrative process. There's an opportunity to object to the decision as it stands. We're going to proceed towards that end. And there's an objection process that the county can engage in, and then there's litigation. And that's the prerogative of the county or any individual citizen or group to pursue that as they see fit. Acts of Congress on a forest plan, I don't think that's probably likely. the burden of proof in the situation in a court case is, did we do adequate, did we meet administrative processes that are expected of us relative to coordination with the county. I think, from my standpoint, I think we have already met that burden from a legal standpoint, but I'm not a lawyer, so that's for lawyers to discuss and argue, and the judges to hear and decide. But we have our administrative processes, our forest planning rule, and we proceed accordingly. And yes, there's the intent that we're collaborating and cooperating and coordinating with our respective neighbors and governments. The question is always going to be, is that to the mutual satisfaction? Are people satisfied with that amount of coordination, or do they not like the answer that came out of it? And so, that's just being straight up honest about it. I think there's going to be times when we agree to disagree and we move on with our respective plans and continue to try and iron out differences in them. But I don't know that the county's going to, has necessarily veto power over a federal forest plan effort.
Travis, I have a practical question on another area where the county may disagree is besides the wilderness designation is wild and scenic river designations. Are potential affected landowners in this type of planning, are they notified of the Forest Service plans to potentially designate an area, or is that just accomplished by the general notification of the plan and the opportunity for public comments?
Well, that's primarily the mode is through the proposed action, or the proposed plan. As far as I know what I was going to say. You mentioned designation. We don't designate anything. We recommend it. Congress designates it. Same thing with wilderness. But when we're making a recommendation, I think we all know that we manage it to retain those values that it's eligible for until Congress acts, and if they act at all. And so that encumbers those lands under kind of the same rules and management in order to retain the values and the options for Congress to act on those designations. But folks along those riverways, it behooves them that they're mindful and if they have opinions, because the Forest Service doesn't, in those situations, we have no jurisdiction over private lands, and at the end of the day, it's almost like how Fish and Wildlife Service will designate critical habitat, and I'll use the meadow mouse as an example, all through that area, and yet we have no control of what happens on those private lands, and nor do we want to encroach on that jurisdictional. That's at the end of the day, we're still free property owners, and if they want to participate in those kinds of things to increase those values, that's their prerogative to do so, but we have no.
I think the Forest Service has encroached on people's right to their water, wouldn't you say, Travis? Or the grass that they own on the allotments that they're fenced off of? Would you consider that an encroachment?
I do not.
Well, I would.
You know? But that's a different question, and you know, I think I respect and understand the stance of folks in terms of the way they see that as a private property right. I still think, and we stand by the fact that Congress has reserved and designated those as public lands and the rights there. Now, water is another story. You know, folks can have private property rights on national forest lands in terms of real property rights and have water rights upon the surface or the land base that is ours, and those are separate. Same thing with mineral rights. You can have 3 different owners. One person owns the water, one person owns the minerals, and have it be public land owning the surface. So those things are acknowledged and recognized. Then the question is, are you restricting reasonable access to those rights is one of those legal questions. But as far as forage goes, it's a permissive use. Forest Service owns it. We allow folks for $1.35 an AUM to come graze it. And
But in regards to the legal contract and an allotment, does an allotment owner own the grass that's growing on that allotment?
there's a lot of arguing about that.
But
right now.
is that, do they, yes or no? Do they own the grass that's growing on the allotment? And do they
No.
have a right to trespass on that ground to access the grass that they own?
No,
No?
it's not my interpretation of it. I mean, again, these are legal arguments, but Forest Service stance on it is we own the grass, we own the trees, we sell it, we put it to good use, trying to create economic activity as a result of the resource itself. And it's not leased, it's not sold, it is permitted uses. And the permitted uses is we allow permission under the permit, under terms and conditions of that permit, to use those resources. It's no different than having a contract, and while it is different, a contract is very different in terms of selling a timber sale. They do it under certain specifications and to our requirements. But, that lumber and the trees become lumber, and that they buy that and they own it. So it's a little different in that sense, but at the end of the day, there's not a property right to timber or a property right to grass. There's an allowable use that we determine.
Well, it's just a shame that, that you don't understand how much this hurts the people of Otero County and our ranchers. I feel like if the Forest Service had a little bit more compassion towards people, and the people that it's negatively affecting, maybe your position would be different, Travis. But, the Forest Service wants to implement these forest plans that negatively impact our ranchers, and it's just a heartless act. It's hard enough to make a living nowadays without the Forest Service being against you every turn you make. It's a shame that your forest plan doesn't help our ranchers and doesn't help the people that are maintaining the land, instead of negatively impacting the people that access our land. It's just really a shame, and maybe if you think about that a little bit, you can more understand our position in the county, where we're just trying to help the people in our county and the people that use these public lands. It's just, I don't know.
Well, Coy, and it's not that I don't understand it. I mean, it's, I've got family members of my own that have had grazing permits and things like that. So it's not about understanding, it's part of being a federal mechanism that is implementing laws made by, our Congress that, they haven't sorted out all of the things that are conflicting in those laws for us. That's for us to try and sort out. And it's not like I can choose to regard or disregard the Endangered Species Act or the National Environmental Policy Act or any of these things. It's like Congress said, here's your marching orders, implement this. And that's who we ought to, if we don't like the results of that as taxpayers and voting citizens, then that's who we need to talk with, change the law. I can't unilaterally change it. So,
Hey Travis, can I say something?
you bet.
Coy, we have a number of public entities, organizations, through their public comments that have been pushing hard for a no grazing alternative, and we're not going to consider that. That's a no. So I would not say that we're anti-grazing, but there's just a lot of various entities that want different things, and it's hard to balance. But like I said, we are not going for the no grazing alternative.
Mr. Mosley, this is Gerald Matherly. You've mentioned that the Congress is going to make their decision and everything. Congress is not going to come out here and walk through these forests. Congress is going to take whatever recommendations you give them, the endangered species environmentalist group give them, and that's what they're going to act off of. That is why we are trying to engage in this and bring the other side of the picture to this so that they know that there is two sides to this story.
Yes. And I appreciate that, and I really want that voice heard, right? I want it documented. If you're going, the best way to influence these, this wilderness, because, we're given a process. Our forest planning rule says go out and evaluate the entire national forest for eligibility for wilderness designation, and go out there and determine eligibility for wild and scenic rivers. And they're fairly all-encompassing kinds of criteria, right? And you get to looking at it and it's like, well, that doesn't give me doesn't give me the feel for wilderness, but yet it's eligible based on this criteria that were provided to us. So this is the kind of conversation and very specifics, those permittees came into our office and they provided us with maps, they provided us with photos, they provided us with very specific things and arguments about why that area that we were proposing in there really didn't need or make it easy to manage for wilderness situations. It's a working landscape out there. There's roads, power lines, there's water development, storage, all kinds of things. And you look at that and you go, yeah, that isn't, that is not the flavor of what I think Congress, and that's my judgment in all honesty, plus the input that I get from the county and those permittees that are directly affected by it, that demonstrates here's why it's not a good candidate. That influences me, right? And that becomes part of the record when the Wilderness Society walks in the next, the other door and is advocating, we need this, we need that, we want it all shut down and we all want it in wilderness. And I'm like, well, no, right? There's roads, there's all of these things. This isn't about shutting down national forest and the uses and the economic activity associated with it. That's our multiple use mandate. Is grazing is a very legitimate, as well as logging and mining and and recreation and all of this that generates economic activity for the local communities and the counties. And, you know, we don't pay taxes except for the in lieu stuff. But at the end of the day, we've got to look at it, all of that and balance it and say, does this land really meet the intent of the wilderness values and the reason why Congress chose to designate and promulgate this law that requires designation of wilderness? And like I said, those permittees in the county, you know, when we get that on record, then I can sit there and say, here's the body of evidence that has come before me that I need to consider. And it's helpful. It gives me foundation to say this should be or shouldn't be in wilderness in that situation where it exists. You know, some of this wilderness that is being proposed is really about cleaning up some boundaries around the White Mountain and the Capitan Wilderness. There's some weird stuff there where roads are encroaching into what was the legal designation that it was mapping error, right? And so we're trying to clean up a little bit of that. And then there's this piece down on the southern Guads adjacent to, you know, it's our, what we call our kind of our cave country out there. It's some rugged, steep, nasty country that's abuts the you know, national parks that are down there. That was already designated wilderness before. It was not recommended as wilderness. It was designated. Sorry, it was designated as a wilderness study area. And so that was brought into the previous forest plan, and we're bringing it forward into this one as to consideration as to whether or not to recommend it as wilderness designation based on its kind of candidate status. So each one of these I'll be looking at and asking that question, does it have the inherent characteristics that seem to allow it to be wilderness? And then what's the public sentiment around and the governmental sentiment around designating that in terms of the impacts to their constituents or the economy or things like that. So anything I can get is only good for me. It informs the decision. And I'm not pushing one way or the other. I'm trying to be as objective as I can and follow process that are put forth to me to carry out. So it's a great opportunity for you guys to voice these concerns and give me something. Because I'll tell you another thing. Saying, oh, we don't like wilderness, it's not good for our constituents, that's very different than saying, there's a road right there, there's power line, there's mines, it's a working footprint on that landscape that really doesn't make it a good candidate for wilderness. That's a very different thing than, I just hate wilderness, you shouldn't do it. And that's what we're looking for, is the specific stuff. That's powerful information when you get down to the specifics.
My understanding that specific stuff is in this area where you're trying to determine a wilderness. There's fiber optic lines, there's water wells, there's infrastructure, there's power lines, there's county roads in there, there's pins, work pins. If you do this to this deal, you're going to take away from the adjoining ranchers on their way that they rotate their cattle and everything, and be able to get in to take care of their cattle. So this to me doesn't even look like it's any kind of a physical option for a wilderness. So why would you be considering this?
It was eligible, based on this very, very encompassing criteria. that were handed to, use this, consider these kinds of things. And it's a mapping exercise more than anything, but then you got to step back and ask yourself, does that make sense? And there's a lot more area on this forest that was eligible. Look at the alternative that is in there that's much more encompassing. I think we included the highest potential areas under that criteria. But there's roads, there's water, lines and, municipal water supplies. There's all kinds of things. And you ask yourself, does this make any sense at all based on that criteria? And that's how we looked at different alternatives. It was based on a ranking process, and I gave direction. Okay, let's in some of these, the proposed action was give me the, based on our study that we did, and it is not perfect and by any stretch of the imagination, but it is our best guess of how we applied that eligibility based on that, and that's what is showing up. It's these slivers of corrections around existing wilderness. There was that one piece that sits out in that Mule Canyon country, and then there's that pre-existing stuff in the southern part of the Guadalupe, right up on the Texas border there, that is rough and rugged and not a lot of access or use in there, and that probably has the characteristics that they're necessary. So yeah, now is the proofing out, and this feedback, it only helps. I'll tell you that what the permittees provided us was influential in the way I looked at that country out there. And it really have us, in fact Diane is now working with the team that did the initial eligibility, and is going to be looking at, based on this new information that probably wasn't considered. It's finer grain information that you don't just pick up on maps and you go, does this still make sense? So I think the point being is you voicing those kinds of concerns and also representing your constituents from that perspective and providing us that, it only helps to solidify, okay, there's some real issues there, and not only is it a handful of citizens and permittees that are concerned about this, but we've got county government that is very concerned about this. And it creates balance in the conversation, because otherwise you just have those other entities that are, whether it's environmental groups or wilderness society or whoever, that are just pushing their agenda, and they're the only ones, they know how to play the game, and they know how to influence those decisions as well. So it gives me documents, it gives me proof that there's other ideas out there that I've got to consider, and it gives me that opportunity to do so. And we just want to continue to do that before I make the decision.
Well, I think we all look forward to working with you with the other counties, with Lincoln and Eddy and Chavis that were on the phone call this morning. So hopefully we can get some of this hammered out and make some people happier than they are right now.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I can't show my cards on this. I know folks mentioned on the last meeting, we would just like to see you remove this from consideration. And I'll be honest with you, I can't do that up front. It's part of the process. In the decision making, you will see how that plays out, and then there will be opportunities to not appeal it, but object to that, and then that's yet another opportunity to course correct and make adjustments based on negotiation of whoever does the objections, because it's probably going to be from multiple sides. But that's what we'll have to sort out. So the more information we can get to right now, where there's still a lot of flexibility for adjustment, is important to me. We'll follow up, and we'll where we left it with Chavez is Chavez County, and was it you, Vicki, that was there? You know, we're going to start coordinating with them to kind of lay out. One is in question is this MOU. So we got to sort that out and get it in a format that we feel is mutually acceptable. Notwithstanding that, I don't want that to be
this is Morgan calling about your auto insurance benefits.
dialing in on what's the issues here, what are the things that we really need to work with the counties on that we see as a rub in their interest or what they're representing here. So it gets us focused on what we need to look at and change in the forest plan, if we see the need to do so. So, you know, we're asked for a representative, a liaison, if you will, that we can work with to really kind of roll up the sleeves and dig into these plans and help us to really get laser focused on what the real, the big issues are there that we see are conflicts between our respective plans. And so I asked that of this commission is identifying somebody that is going to be that Otero County counterpart to represent your interest, and work with Diane and myself and to really get us focused, and then we'll be documenting all this stuff, so we've got fodder for our file that gives me rationale to make my adjustments accordingly.
Mr. Mosley, at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about, I believe Mrs. Prather said she didn't want to drag this out for another year. We talked about a time extension. Unless I missed it, I never heard what kind of time extension you're talking about.
I'm considering the next couple of months. So, February, March time frame, if we could really get in there and work with you all on the specifics of what the concerns are. I know wilderness is one, but if there's some other things, you mentioned one, the scenic river designation, or not designation, but eligibility, and feedback on that. I think we'd like to understand where you stand on those things and what your concerns are. And especially if you're representing, individual constituents that have concerns or issues, helping echo those concerns for us to consider, and be that conduit for them through us at this point. Because what I don't want to do is we're not going to go into extending a comment period for another couple of months. What we are going to take the time for the next couple of months is to work with the counties to really dial in on our respective plans and what you see are inconsistent with our plan versus yours, and how to represent those interests of your constituents in our plan. So we're at that stage of analyzing these comments and responding to them through adjustments of the forest plan as we move from draft to final. So the next 2 months are really important time frame for us to do that work.
So the next 2 months for trying to finalize, is this just the wilderness part or the whole plan?
It'd be the whole thing. Kind of the time horizon that we see is we're working through this comments and adjustments to the plan, the draft plan, and the draft environmental impact statement. And probably toward the end of summer, we're expecting that we'll have those documents in a more of a finalized state. As a cooperating agency, you'd be able to have some, preliminary look at that before we go public with it. Usually what happens there is we publicize the final EIS and the final plan, and there will be a draft, I think, correct me, Diane, but there's a draft record of decision that then is held in abeyance until the objection period is finalized. And objections to that, and then ultimately the record of decision is issued with my signature and final decision. And then after that, then there's litigation options if that's still not satisfactory to folks. But, we're looking at really by the end of this calendar year to have this whole draft, move to a final forest plan, final environmental impact statement.
So this plan, does this have the logging part of it too?
Yeah, it'll address all of it.
Okay, so
Logging, grazing.
you haven't even got done the study on the spotted owl or the mouse or any of those. So how are you going to implement this plan if you haven't even completed your side of the work?
Well, that work never ends, right? And we're constantly, some of that is not ours to study and decide on, right? Especially endangered species. We end up reacting to those listings and trying to adjust our management to address the recovery of those species. But all of that is always, there's always something in the works. And so we've got to put our best plan together, and it's adaptable. Most of the, where the rubber meets the road are these project decisions that have to do with, our planning for a timber sale or an allotment management plan or mining operations or recreation facilities or whatever. And that's how we kind of reconcile the impacts of, say, endangered species that you brought up and try to, deal with those kinds of conflicts there at the site-specific implementation level. So our forest plan is meant to give us broad guidance, not make on-the-ground decisions.
Yes, sir. Well, and I understand that, and there's always something going on, but you're giving us 60 days to try to get this negotiated and worked out, to where if you're talking about on the logging back to the spotted owl, the Forest Service has had 10 years to do their study, and they haven't even completed that.
Well, I'm not sure what study you're talking about, because, but, we're constantly collecting information and analyzing new stuff, so.
So can I interject?
Okay.
The idea of the plans for the New Mexico forest and also Arizona is to get away from managing individual animals, because every time something gets listed or something changes, we're scrambling. So the idea is rather to have a healthy forest and then the animals will do well. And so we're trying to move away from managing for owls, managing for butterflies, managing for salamanders. It becomes very cumbersome.
Yes, ma'am, and I understand trying to get away from that, but the owl is what put the logging industry out of business, which is going to give you a
Yeah.
healthy forest.
I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. That and the fact that there's not a lot of saw timber out there on the landscape. The vast, almost 80-90% of what's growing out there is small diameter material that no one can put a good use to, at least the current markets that we have. Because, this country was railroad logs, and they picked the pumpkins pretty well across that landscape. And they're still out there, some of it. But when you look at the 1 million acres that's out there that makes up the Lincoln National Forest, all you got to do is drive past it, and you can see a lot of small diameter stuff that's creating fire danger that we're all concerned about.
And the reason why the trees are such small diameters, Travis, is because they're so starved down for water, because there's too many of them out there, because the Forest Service has done such a horrible job of managing the forest and cutting the trees out. If you would thin the trees out, then those existing trees would get more get more nutrients, and they would get bigger. That's kind of 101, I think.
Yeah, I would disagree with you, quite. It all needs thinned, you got too much competition.
It's because you think it, yeah, but it's not. The reason why the trees are small isn't because the loggers went in there and cut all the big trees. The forest needs to be thinned out, and in your forest plan, fuel removals is not even. I didn't even see it in there. That's not a focus. And right now, if you want to talk about the drought and the temperatures warming up, it creates more of a fire hazard, which the Forest Service should be focusing more on fuel removals, being that we're drier now than we were before. But instead, you'd rather focus on wilderness areas and taking away ranchers' rights to the land and controlling more land. And as far as collaboration and cooperation and sitting down at the table with the Forest Service, that's not a place that I want to be, and I don't think it's a place that the county should be. I think we're too far away right now. My vote is to completely reject this forest plan and come up with a new plan where you allow the county the opportunity to participate, where we can come up with a plan that works for the people that live and utilize the land. Just like I had told you maybe a year or so ago, or a year and a half ago, whenever you were in the meeting, that the county needs to be involved in the forest plan on the ground level, not on the backside on a public comment, so you guys can check off the box where you collaborated with the county, signed an MOU, and then shove something down our throat. If it was more of a friendly plan where it was going to work more for the people of Otero County, then I'd say maybe we're close enough where we can negotiate. But right now, I think we're too far apart myself, personally.
Okay. I respect that sentiment. I think at the end of the day, we're trying to create a balanced, multiple-use plan here that addresses everything that we're delegated by Congress to manage, and so the process goes on. There ain't no stopping. We're not going to stop, because we have to move forward.
Yeah, and we won't stop either, Travis, and we'll take whatever avenues we need to take to protect the people of Otero County.
Okay. Well, this is a great opportunity for us, and that's the intent of this call, is to try and reconcile those perceived differences that are going on. But this is not new to us, and I feel like we've, tried to create a balanced situation that is honors and respect traditional uses and the economy of these communities and what they rely on. I guess, if you disagree with that, then help us understand why. Right? And
Help you understand why we disagree with it? I think we've already been over that, haven't we? It's because you're taking away our right to utilize the land and to sustain our families on the land that we've sustained our families on for generations, Travis. Just like Gerald mentioned a minute ago with the logging, you look back at the Otero County was built on a foundation of logging and utilizing our mountain until the Forest Service comes in with your forest plans like you do that continue to restrict the usage of our land.
Well, I hope you see something different in the coming years here in terms of what's available and what we're trying to do for treatments out there. But there's some promise there for additional resources to bring that to bear and opportunities for contractors to thin and utilize materials that come off this national forest. So, we're trying to increase the pace and scale as best we can with the monies that we're provided, and hopefully that addresses some of that concern. But that isn't really part of, that intent is in that forest plan, and I'm sorry that you don't see that, or you're not feeling it based on what you're reading, but that's the whole thrust of that, is things are out of whack up there. There's too much high density of trees. Their age class, distribution, size class is all out of whack. It's not healthy. It's creating unhealthy forests, unhealthy trees. They're not allowed to grow, and we have to do something about that. There's no daylight between our perceptions of, yours or my perception of that. I think we agree on that.
But was that addressed in the forest
We
plan?
can get to it. How's that?
Was that addressed in the forest plan, the problem that you just explained and that we both agree on?
Yep.
Was that included in the forest plan?
It's where you find it there is the way we describe our desired conditions versus our existing condition. There's a big disparity between what we have now and what it should look like. And much of the outcome of that is removal of a bunch of material up there. It happens to be a lot of that material is more the biomass than the saw logs, because that's the stuff that needs to be removed. We need to thin the smaller diameter stuff to give opportunity for the remainder to grow, and that's just basic forestry, right? Like you said, using both logging and contracting crews to do the thinning, as well as prescribed fire to clean up the fuel and create a more resilient forest and a little more. It's never going to be fireproof. Fire's always going to be on that mountain. The question is, how quick does it bounce back, and how well situated are we to protect private infrastructure and private values that exist on that landscape up there. And so I think when we talk about it in that way, I don't see that there's a lot of daylight between them. But that's my layman's best way I can describe what that intent is in there. Yeah, we use a lot of government jargon and technical words from the scientific stuff, but that's really what the intent of that forest plan is driving towards. making available grazing. I mean, we're not making any decisions about reduction of grazing, and this one wilderness designation area, I totally respect what that does. It creates more restrictions and it makes it more difficult and increases operating costs to those that would graze that land base. But it doesn't close it to grazing. If motorized use becomes a problem, that kind of thing, sure. But, you know, given the fact that it is already a working landscape, well, that has some impact in the way I look at that, right?
Can we have anybody, if they want to say something?
So why not?
Does anybody want to go on record and say anything or ask Travis any questions since we've got him online? No takers.
But Mr. Mosley, if you think back, how long have you been in this district, in this forest?
It'll be 8 years here in May.
Well, when the spotted owl first came out, which was about, what, 20 years ago, there was two big major commercial sawmills in this county, probably 15 big logging companies in there. And look at it now. There's one that's probably 2 months from being out of business, and 5 little mills down here in town. And that was all shut down by the spotted owl, which at that time went into creating your dense forest where none of these trees have been able to grow. So what has the forest not, do they not take that into consideration and see where the problem really is?
No, I think it is taken into consideration. You know, I started my career in the Forest Service in the Pacific Northwest. I'm from Chaman, up near Chaman, New Mexico, but that's where I started, and as a timber sale planner in the Cascades, and I saw the impacts of that firsthand, just as it was hitting, you know, all of that in that country. And then you had the Mexican spotted owl thing happening here. Yeah, I don't, you know, I don't want to discount the idea that you know, the owl had some impacts immediately in terms of stopping activity until things, you know, we started sorting what that was out. But our latest, you know, our latest recovery plan for the spotted owl has recognized that it's really not so much the regulated and purposeful management of those lands and logging or thinning and things like that that's the threat. It's catastrophic wildfire. Everybody loses when the damn whole hillside burns up and the whole mountain burns. And our communities, every resource is impacted that way. And that is an acknowledgement right now, even by our environmentalists, folks that are out there telling us that we ought to do this or ought to do that, that fire is ultimately the bigger threat. It's not intelligent logging and things like that in fact, I think there's an acknowledgement that that's necessary, even to allow us to be able to put fire back out there and clean up a lot of these fuels, because it's in a condition, until we do some mechanical treatment, we can't safely do prescribed burning or things like that, because it's too dangerous to get out of control on us. So that's our primary tool, is get out there and do some thinning, do some logging. A lot of it is these, what we call stewardship contracts, where we're paying for their services to do the treatment, and in the process salvage anything that's merchantable that they can put to good use, because we are tending to focus on smaller diameter stuff. So that thinking has changed over that 20 years, but it's still not you know, and it never will be what it once was, because there's a lot of things going on in the markets. Think about alternative, you know, other countries flooding our markets with timber, you know, alternative building material. All of that is influencing the economics of using this material out here. And you know, the small mom and pop operators that are still operating here, they're able to mill a cant and sell it out in the oil field, or make some post and poles or latillas, or it's these specialty products that seem to, you know, have a niche there. But you don't have the Georgia Pacifics out here making, you know, doing harvesting for biomass and making paper or plywood, or not plywood, but, you know, wafer board or particle board, stuff like that. We don't have those markets around here. And that's the only way to be able to use these very effectively, the smaller diameter stuff. I know Coy and I had conversations about biochar and trying to get something off the ground there. So it's trying to, my big fear is, unless there's a market for it, we are where we're at now. You know, our big dimension lumber sawmills, you know, they're competing with a whole different world out there, and in little bitty Sacramento Mountains, it's a kind of a small land base compared to, you know, the Northwest or even the Southeast, that's producing incredible amounts of wood out there, both saw timber and otherwise. There's a lot that's going into what's affecting the economy of our local area in the world of timber. But
There was a market here, and that's what the problem is. There was a market here. The mill here in Alamogordo used to employ close to 200 people. It was a 2x4 stud mill. The mill in Muscalero was a 2x6. They made the studs, and then they made 16-footers. There used to be where we would haul the chips from the mill to Sholo and Snowflake to it was the particle board and the chip factories back there. You have a pallet factory in El Paso. There is a market here, but the Forest Service has, and I'm not saying you, I'm just saying the Forest Service, they have totally shut that whole total market down. And my idea what the Forest Service was supposed to be doing was creating a healthy, safe forest. Can you tell me right now that this is a healthy, safe forest?
no, really.
Yes, it is?
No,
No, he said no.
Oh,
He said no.
if we're going to be honest, we know, you know, everything that we've done lately, we're looking at risk to communities, risk to these natural resources, and the Sacramento Mountains is one of the highest risk areas in the nation. And that reality is in some ways helpful, because it's got people in the highest levels of our organization focused on how we can remedy that. And why, you know, this whole, I know this infrastructure bill and all of that business, we're standing to receive dollars there, and we're right now feverishly aligning projects to take advantage of those funds, because we've got to ask for them. We've got to line up and get in the starting blocks so that we can put that money to good use for the protection of our communities and that mountain up there, and having a more healthy situation. So, yeah, I mean, there's acknowledgement there, and we need to do as much as we can. But I'll be honest with you, you know, right now, given the ability to sell the products that are coming off of there, it's a liability, not an asset. You know, it's like we're paying people to get that wood out of there. It's not like it's covering its own costs. there just isn't the market for the kind of material that's coming off, that needs to come off. So it's taxpayers getting, paying for those treatments at the end of the day. They're not paying for themselves.
But Travis, as you acknowledge the health of the forest and the amount of fuels and stuff up on the mountain, but then you look at the fuel wood and the firewood restrictions that the Forest Service has right now. If the Forest Service main objective was to remove dead fuels and stuff off of the mountain, then you wouldn't be restricting people for only cutting a certain amount of firewood every year and then restricting all their access to different parts of the forest. You would let them go out and cut all the wood they wanted wherever they wanted to cut the wood at. If something like that was in your forest plan and forest health was a focus, as Gerald just mentioned, then the forest plan would be much easier, and we would willingly support it. I mean, we all want a healthy forest, but the current proposed forest plan that we have before us does not lead us down a road that leads to a more healthy forest. It leads us down a road that gives the Forest Service and the federal government more control and power over the land. And I'm going to fight that tooth and nail, as I believe that my fellow commissioners will as well. I mean, that's why I have a problem with the forest plan from the ground up, because it doesn't lead us to a path to a healthy forest, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I understand that sentiment, and I tend to be one that thinks of trying to facilitate our public's use of the land rather than restrict it and regulate it. At the same time, though, there are these other pesky little laws that require us to also regulate how that land gets utilized and whatnot. And
sure, and that's what we can address in a forest plan that works.
With spotted owl packs up there that a lot of those restrictions are about other species and concerns that are put in place that create that. I mentioned having grown up in northern New Mexico, where fuel wood is a primary source of heat for a lot of folks.
As it is
And
here, yeah.
man, there's a lot of material out here. When I start driving around, I'm like, this should be harvested, right? Why aren't they taking this wood? And, we have a little bit of a different tax. So that's something that we can work on in terms of, what are you seeing and what latitudes do we have to make adjustments and make it less restrictive for people to access fuel wood, how much they can take. We reduced the cost out there. And, again, our fuel wooding is intended, especially for the general public, it's personal use fuel wood. So there are restrictions on the amounts. I think it's 10 cords. I've never burned 10 cords of wood in my life. In northern New Mexico, much less down here. But it's intended to cater to that fundamental need. Do you need, what happens if personal use, right? Why do you need 50 cords? That ends up getting sold, which is a commercial use, not a personal use.
Well, and why aren't the commercial woodcutters more supported? If we have too much dead fuel and we have dead trees and we have trees that need to come out of our forests, then why don't you incentivize the commercial woodcutters to go out there and cut firewood to provide to the community, instead of restricting them and charging them for every cord of wood that they cut off the forest? If the wood needs to come off, and as in your own words you said that the wood up there is a liability, then why not incentivize the woodcutters, the commercial woodcutters, or at least let them go cut it for free as much as they want to cut, But instead, the Forest Service comes in and imposes regulations and restrictions and makes it harder for the woodcutters to even be able to make any money doing it.
Well, you know, there's something to be talked about there and how we go about that, Coy, and I'd love to sit down and iron out and think about approaches to doing that, because there are things within our latitude to make those adjustments, and it doesn't have much to do with the forest plan, as much as, you know, local common sense decisions on being less restrictive and more permissive to do those kinds of things. A lot of it has to do with us being able to lay it out as a commercial opportunity, right? The idea that, oh, go up there and get what you want wherever you want it, that ain't going to ever really happen. We've got to be able to kind of manage where and when and how much, and be somewhat prescriptive about what we're trying to achieve out there. But there's, you know, I was up there I remember as a district ranger, we have latitude to do free use permits for personal use. You know, we're paying people to go out there and thin it and haul that wood away and chop it up for firewood or mill it for cans or whatever. That's part of that stewardship contracting that I'm talking about. So there are those opportunities. It's just a matter of
But you can't even go cut dead and down?
putting it up for bid.
Can you cut dead and down? Is there restrictions on how much dead and down firewood you can cut? And does the Forest Service charge those people for cutting dead and down? I'm not talking about green trees. I'm talking about stuff laying on the forest floor.
Well, that's mostly the personal use fuel wood that we use dead and down permits for, and you know, I think up on the Smoky Bear district, they've done some things. I'd have to look at it, you know, in detail and see what those opportunities are. But I know we've taken the tact of, you know, within 150 feet of a road or 300 feet, you can harvest dead and down for personal use.
Why not commercial though? Why don't you allow commercial? If a guy wants to cut his neighbor's firewood for him and his neighbor's going to pay him, why couldn't he go up there and gather dead and down wood off the forest floor? But since it's commercial and he's selling it, now you're restricting the people of being able to go gather wood up off the forest floor that needs to come out. You know, that's our frustrations with the Forest Service, Travis, is stuff like that.
Well, you know, I'll sit here and I say I don't necessarily disagree with you from a practical standpoint. You know, at the same time, there is, you know, we have our policies, we have our things that make this distinction between commercial and personal use and how those programs operate. Having said that, Coy, I think you and I both know that people are doing exactly what you said, and I certainly have not made it an emphasis to get in the way of that. If it happens, it happens. You know, somebody's going down there, I'll pay you $50 or $100, $300 a cord to go up there and get that for me. We all know that's going on. I see people out here selling it out of the back of their rigs, right, in town. It's certainly not an emphasis that I've said to our law enforcement, hey, we gotta get a handle on this.
Yeah, but it's not about turning a blind eye to it, Travis. It's about encouraging it. You know, the Forest Service should be encouraging the people in the community to go do just that. I mean, if we really need to get dead and down fuels, and I mean, I know we're just talking about one small subject, you know, I mean, a small part of it, but again, this is why I wanted, you know, more of the county's involvement in the creation of this forest plan, so this stuff could be incorporated into it and it could work for the people of Otero County instead of the way the forest plan sits right now, how it's gonna just hurt the people of Otero County. You know, I mean, that's why I wish there would have been collaboration from the start.
The difference in the perception there is our forest plan doesn't talk about the tactics, doesn't say how we go about doing it. What it does is it lays out, here are the desired conditions we want to achieve out there, and it leaves those tactical decisions to conversations like we're just having here. How do we do that, right? What makes sense? How do we incentivize it and facilitate those opportunities? And those decisions are within our control and purview to work on, and outside of the forest plan, because the forest plan isn't going to prescribe we're going to allow that, because those opportunities are already defined in our own policy and how much we can do with that approach. So I guess what I'm saying is that those kinds of decisions are things that I think you're probably more interested in, and how do we make it practical for folks to do these kinds of things? How do we incentivize it? And how do we not only help our citizens, but reduce the cost to the taxpayer in the same process, right? In the same stroke of the pen and approach that we do it. And, I've often had that. It's like, we have all this need to remove this material, and we're being so restrictive about how that happens. And in my past, I've done that, where it's like, okay, we're going to offer free use. And the first 5 cords is free. And if you need an additional 5 cords, pay us $4 a cord. For $20, you go get another 5 cords. Most people can afford $20.
Yeah. Well,
to get 5 cords of wood, right?
We just had a big group of people that were sitting present in the meeting. Travis, they all just walked out. You'd probably recognize half of them that were here. But as a commission board, Travis, we're put in a position to represent those people, and we know the people they're struggling right now as it is to try to survive. You've never had to make a living ranching. You've never had to deal with the Forest Service from the rancher side of it. You've always been on the government side of it. But I'll tell you something, from my family, our whole life has been suppressed by the Forest Service. It seems like every time we see a little bit of daylight, the Forest Service comes through with a new restriction, and I know that all you're doing is the bidding of the Endangered Species Act or the federal government or Congress or whatever. But I feel like our commission board right here is going to take as strong of a stand as we need to in order to protect the people's rights to use the land and create a healthy forest. And I'm not seeing it in the plan that you've submitted, and collaboration and cooperation moving forward. I hate to say it, but it's almost like sitting down across the table from a terrorist. You don't do that. You don't negotiate with somebody that's trying to destroy your livelihood. And that's what I feel like the Forest Service has been doing over the years, and we're sick of it, we're tired of it, and we want change, and a change could come with the forest plan that actually works for the people. And the plan that you guys have doesn't do that, Travis.
Yeah. All right.
Mr. Mosley, can I ask you one question?
Go ahead.
When you're developing your forest plan, what part of it, is there a part that you have to mandate so much land in a forest wilderness at every 10 years, 1 year, 5 years? What brought this whole deal about to where you're trying to mandate or recommend wilderness land?
So it comes from our forest planning rule it came about, correct me, Diane, the year of our forest planning rule
We're working under the 2012 planning rule.
2012 planning rule. So what that planning rule is, it's kind of a framework of things we have to analyze and a process we have to follow. And one thing related specifically to wilderness is is determining eligibility across all of the forests. Every one of the forest plans in the nation has to go through this as they go through this process. And it's an evaluation process, there's an eligibility determination, and there's criteria that we have to consider across this entire 1.1 million acres that we have. It's probably less than that because pre-existing wilderness is not considered because it already is designated. But the remainder of that land base we put through this evaluation process to determine eligibility. And it's, like I said, it's more inclusive than restrictive, that criteria and process. Then we work through this public involvement process to ask questions about, what's the manageability of that for the purposes of wilderness? What are the characteristics? Because even this eligibility determination, there could be roads in there. There could be infrastructure in there. And there's ideas that, they can be closed and those can be camouflaged or hidden, and we can always bury power lines. So, there's all these kinds of ideas. And why don't you go, Diane, if I'm getting off track here.
No, you're not getting too far off track. So yes, there's a process. It's kind of a winnowing process, and you asked how often. We don't have to do this every year, thank God. We don't have to do it every 5 years. We do it when the land management plan gets revised, and that could be maybe every 15 years, every 20 years that we would look at this. So it is a winnowing process. You start large. You pull all the open system roads out, so that removes some of the areas. Then you winnow again, and you start looking at how many improvements. Are there a lot of noise disturbances? Can you see a lot of the outside world? What are the opportunities for primitive recreation? You consider all these things, and we came up with a ranking system, and so we had some low-ranking areas that had a lot of mining and motorized, a lot of disturbances. And then we had some areas that were medium-ranked, and then we had some areas that were high-ranked. Okay, the next step is when you develop your alternatives. So we had public comments that said they didn't like wilderness. We had public comments that suggested just a couple of areas. We had public comments that wanted a whole lot of wilderness, right? So we put those in alternatives. The whole lot of wilderness people, we gave them alternative C. We don't want a whole lot of wilderness. We came up with alternative B. And there's even another alternative E that focuses on economic uses. That has the least amount of wilderness, not very much. And so this is a tweaking process. Our range permittees came in and gave us a presentation that we're going to be reevaluating some of those areas that were in alternative E. So right now is really the fine-tuning, and even still, towards the end, if Travis gets feedback that a lot of the folks don't think an area has a high eligibility or a lot of the characteristics, he can make the decision based on that input at the very end not to include it. So it's a really flexible process, and it's a winnowing process. And we're trying to come up with an alternative that, we can't make everybody happy. But we're trying to come up with an alternative that works for the forest, given the condition of the forest.
Yes, ma'am, and when you just said that right there, we just talked about how unhealthy our forest is, And then you're wanting to turn a big chunk of our forest into a wilderness to where we can't even get in at some point to try to improve the healthiness. Because if you do turn it into a wilderness, you're gonna go in there with an axe and a shovel. And there's nobody gonna go in there and thin and
Is this Coy? Is this Coy? Coy, I don't want to.
No, it's not. It's Gerald for one. It's not me.
Okay. It's not my decision, and no, I don't want to. But there's definitely folks out there in the world that want a lot of wilderness. That's in one of the alternatives. We don't have to pick that alternative. It's up to Travis.
Yeah.
well, there's way more property up there that would be more fitting a wilderness than a populated area like that. You could take portions of the west side of West Side Road in those bluffs and those cliffs where they're not running cattle in there, there's no roads in there, there's no power lines. Why wouldn't you designate area like that if you're needing to throw acreage out there?
Well, those areas were considered, and one of the things that we looked at there is you've got the community of Alamogordo with water lines that come off of there. We got pre-existing motorized trails that go up through there. There's this kind of, you're overlooking Alamogordo, right? You have that wilderness feeling of primitiveness as you look down across a city full of lights and things like that. So there are those that are very tangible things, like there's infrastructure, and then there's this idea of solitude and primitiveness and these other things that are described in the Wilderness Act that you also consider, and they're much more subjective. But I look at those, and you're right. There's not a lot of roads. It's not real conducive to having roads. It's rugged country, and it's probably the land base itself, if it's not for the fact that it's overlooking a Air Force base in a large community, that it would probably, the land base itself is well suited, but probably not these other subjective things like solitude and primitiveness, or that sense of wilderness. So that's kind of why that area, and in all honesty, that's a major water, we got those water lines coming down off of there, down Alamo Canyon, and motorized trails up through there too, that most people don't think about, but they're there. And
Travis, I think just because from a wilderness area you can see the lights of town, but yeah, the wilderness area that you have proposed has gas wells on it and water storages and roads, and I mean, I don't know. I think that's an extremely weak argument because you can see the lights of town and there's water lines running across an area. That's why you don't consider it a wilderness area. Yeah, I mean, we went through the PowerPoint here just recently with all of the photos and stuff of this proposed wilderness area that you have, and it looks, most of the pictures look like a subdivision. And they're wanting to turn that into a wilderness area, and just like Gerald said, you dedicate this as a wilderness area, then all the maintenance from then on out is going to have to be primitive, and it's just the stupidest thing that that the Forest Service could possibly even try to present in a forest plan is a wilderness area with roads and gas wells and storage tanks and all the infrastructure that we've seen. It makes no sense unless it's more about control than it is a wilderness. Whenever you factor that in there, then it makes total and perfect sense. If you want to control that area of land, then turn it into a wilderness area. It falls underneath new regulations, and you restrict all the usage and access to it. That's why we have a problem with your forest plan.
And part of that, Coy, is you're hitting on it right there. Is the question really for me is, did we adequately evaluate those conditions for that piece of ground that sits out there in that Mule Canyon country. And it's opened my eyes, that very presentation, of like, wow, there's a lot more out there than we probably factored in and considered. So, you know, like I said, that presentation, that information that those allotment holders provided to us very much influenced the way I look at that land base up there. And I'm not gonna sit here and telegraph what my decision is, because we're still in this process of evaluating it all. But it did, all that you just said, Coy, is exactly the kind of things that we need documented and put into the record from a standpoint of the county government's stance on this.
Sure.
That helps me to have something in writing to evaluate as I back up decisions that I have to make along the way to refine our plan to the final format.
But yes, sir, and it is on public record right now as this meeting's being recorded, and every position that we have shared with you and our concerns have been shared with you from the beginning of this meeting. So if this progresses and we try to have something shoved down our throat, we have to take the legal route, then all of this conversation will be brought back to light, and it will be presented to defend our position or our case.
Good. Well, we'll take that as public comment and help that make that part of our record as well.
Sure.
And so this conversation is helpful to me in terms of understanding where you stand on that subject especially. But if there's other things, then we need to also dive into those. And I know we've talked about Wild and Scenic. So kind of the way we're planning on proceeding is continuing to dive into these specific topics that maybe it's not just wilderness, maybe it's other things that you want us to better focus on. If any more specifics that help us focus in on particular elements of our forest plan will be helpful. And if it'll help us to make our final adjustments. And if at the end of the day you still don't like it, well, okay, then you can take that stand of it's still inadequate from our perspective. That's your prerogative, that's your right. And then you can take there will be, our administrative process would be then the objection process, and then again, once a decision is made, then the question is really about litigation. And that's just out there, that's the process. So,
Okay. And what's that?
That was that PowerPoint.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and one more question before we get finished, Travis, too, and one that I've been pressing for the last year, over the last year, and it's a simple one. We know that the Three Rivers fire was human caused, and we've tried for the last year to get a response back from the Forest Service to know if that fire was intentional or if it was accidental. Because as a Board of County Commissioners, we need to know if we just have somebody careless that just dropped a match, or if we have an arsonist that lives inside of our county. So I would like to ask you, Travis, was the fire intentional or was it accidental?
that's something I don't even know myself.
Wow.
And I'm not, the party line is it's under investigation. We don't, law enforcement has reviewed that and collected evidence there. I'm not even sure what it all is. I don't supervise and our law enforcement branch is kind of separated and segmented from our National Forest Management. But, so what we all know is there wasn't lightning, it wasn't the time of year of lightning, so what else is there, right? And
Yeah.
the process of deduction leads us to the conclusions that you're drawing. The big question of intentionality or not, we don't know. We do not know if it was an arsonist or somebody, that was careless.
But, I mean, that's just I feel like that's kind of a level of disrespect, Travis, and I'm not putting that on you, but I am putting it on the Forest Service if it's your law enforcement department or whoever it is. Because we've been asking that. We asked Laura Rabin directly that question not that long ago, repeatedly. And the Forest Service won't allow the county the respect of where they're at in the investigation and what the findings are to date. I mean, we have a responsibility as well. Our county commission board does, and that's to protect the health, safety, and well-being of the people that live inside of our county. And so in order to accomplish our job and honor our oath to office, we need to have some answers from the Forest Service in regards to that fire. And I just feel like it's disrespectful not to allow the people of Otero County the respect of where this investigation's at, because it's not like it's just been a month or so. It's been over a year.
Well, I could certainly have law enforcement come and speak to this specifically. We have
appreciate it.
Special agent in charge out of our regional office that has a heck of a lot more influence over this
Sure.
situation and what they're willing to share and not share. But
Well,
I think
if you could relay that to him, Travis, because I just want you to know that I'm only the voice, but it means a lot to many of our county. I get lots of people that ask me, I get lots of inquiries, and it's not just one disgruntled county commissioner that's demanding it. I'm asking on behalf of the people of Otero County, because the people of Otero County want to know where this investigation is at and how it's moving along. So if you could do that, if you could get somebody from the law enforcement side to attend our next county commission meeting, we would be very grateful to that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, I know there was an invite that came out from your emergency manager that I committed to coming to that.
Okay.
So when is that meeting? Remind me. I think I put it on my calendar.
I believe it's the 10th of February. It's the second Thursday.
Yes, February 10th.
Okay. So I will reach out and see if I can get one of these individuals that's in the know and they can speak to this, because
Well, we appreciate that.
I leave you with this to consider. I mean, it's like most law enforcement kinds of investigations. They're pretty, they don't lay out what the evidence is for everyone to see and know before they've made some determination.
We just want some
And
general
that's just
questions
protecting-
answered, like if it was intentional or accidental, if they know that or not. If they don't know it, then they can say we don't know. But if they do know it, we'd like the respect of knowing if we have somebody careless or if we have an arsonist living in our county.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'll make that personal contact and see what we can do to drive a more satisfactory answer than it's still under investigation.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, you guys have anything else? All right, well, I think that's about the end of it. Thank you, Travis and Diana, for speaking with us today. I think that we're never going to get anywhere if we can't talk to each other, so I appreciate the time of getting to spend with you today.
Yes, and I recognize that and appreciate that sentiment, and
Sure.
I think it's worthwhile that we do that more often than not, because that really is, even if we choose to, if we have disagreements, it's important to understand each other. So.
Sure, and just because there's a lot of statements that have been made with compassion and emotion, doesn't mean that anything that's been said has been personal towards anybody. So just know that. I mean, we're just trying to do our best to represent the people that have entrusted us with these offices, and I hope that y'all understand that and know that, you know, we're just trying to look out for our loggers and our ranchers and the people that access and utilize the public land.
I do understand it, and I'm respectful of your positions and stances. So I don't take it personal. It's we're all trying to represent our jobs and positions that I know you're elected to, and so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Travis.
Thank you.
All right. You have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, you too.
Y'all too.
All right, have a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Real quick.
Yeah, let's
Oh.
wait.
Oh, sorry.
Make sure that's
Yeah.
So they wanted a liaison to meet. I mean, Chaves County's sending Margaret Byfield, so we could either contract her to represent us, or I can reach out to her and see if I can represent Otero, or if
I like
any of the
that idea.
commissioners would want
Yeah.
to be the liaison to go to these meetings. We just need to decide on who's going to do that.
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea for you to be a liaison with Margaret,
My-
because she's got so much knowledge about this land issue.
My position, I don't think that, I mean, what good is it going to do? What good is it going to do to go and sit down and start collaborating and cooperating over a forest plan that we're so far away from? I think that we would probably have a stronger position legally if we just totally rejected this plan and didn't, because that's what the government, that's what they always want to do, is they want to draw you into negotiations and collaboration and cooperation, and all that does is just further the possibility of getting this plan in place whenever the plan from the beginning to end, I don't feel like is designed to help support and sustain the people of the county. I think so. I would be against entering into any kind of an MOU or any kind of negotiations. I think we would be better suited just to reject it. I think. I mean.
Well, I'd rather be in the fight and fight for what we want rather than just letting whoever
I know.
make decisions for us. So I want to have Otero County to have a voice in this.
I know, but but again, if you are in the fight, if you reject it, and then they try to implement it, then possibly, I don't know. I mean, we would have to research the laws, but at least then maybe we would have a legal position to come back at them and sue them for trying to implement a forest plan that we have vehemently rejected without beginning to open the door for negotiations and collaboration, because again, that's what they'll use. They'll say, well, we made the effort, well, we met with them on so many times and we gave them the opportunity, but again, it's kind of like I said a minute ago, it's kind of like sitting down at the table with the terrorist. I mean, if their intention is to harm you, then you don't even sit across the table from them. You draw your positions and you fight them back, and unfortunately, that's what I see the Forest Service has right now. I mean, I don't think we can sit down and negotiate and collaborate and come up with a revised plan that's going to work. We're going to have to compromise too much, I feel like. I think it would be possibly better just to say, no way, we need a new plan. we need to be involved in the plan. We need a representative from Otero County to give our input in the building of the plan and not just on the backside on the public comment, you know, I mean, it's a stronger stand.
I don't know. I would rather get in there and fight for what we want and have a voice.
What
mean,
about you, Gerald?
Well, I'm feeling there's 4 counties that all have a stake in this, basically the same stake.
Yeah?
You join forces of 4 counties, I think you're going to be stronger than just one fighting, and I don't think any of them's going to accept it until it's correct. That's my feeling there. We can get, if RB does join up with this other lady that got the knowledge of it to fight, all it's doing is creating him more knowledge to be able to protect us here.
Exactly.
Period. But if there's the 4 counties pull together, that's got to have some power to it.
If we were to all 4 pull together and reject the plan, you know, instead of sending a liaison to go sit down with them, and then you begin to go down a road that I think that it's the reason why we're where we're at today. It's because the county's always just tried to work with them, and we'll work with you and we'll collaborate. We'll sign an MOU. That's why, like with the Mexican gray wolf deal, I was so vehemently against signing any type of an MOU with the Fish and Wildlife on the wolf. It's like, I think that we say no. And if you try to push this on us, then we're going to sue you, because we should have a right to be represented on the local level. We should have a voice. The county should have a say if we want to receive this and tweak it, or if we just say no, bring us something different. And I think we'd be much better suited in the fight, and we could have a much greater chance of actually creating a change if we don't keep just going along with the MOUs and the liaisons and the negotiations and the collaboration, and it's everything that the government needs to build their case to say, well, we gave you a choice, we gave you an opportunity, you could have. No, not if you just say, we're not going to talk to you.
I don't think the feeling I'm getting from them is they're not going to cow down. They're going to fight this because the wilderness area,
Yeah.
which is the main trajectory area, but there's more to this plan than just the wilderness.
Yeah.
There's more issues. There really is.
Yeah, and if they try to push it on us, then we sue them. That's what they would do to us. We could sue them. But I really think, I mean, we could just reject the plan and say no, and then see what they do. I bet you that they would have a different response than let's work this out, you know, I mean.
If 4 counties rejected it, that's got to have response.
Yeah.
And if they stand up and fight, and if they don't if they work together and they come in together as a strong team, which it's a lot easier to say no to one guy sitting there than it is 4 counties with 20 people sitting there.
Sure.
I feel.
Sure, if all the counties would just fully reject the plan and say, this plan does not work. Let's build another plan. Let's come up with another, and allow us, like I told Travis too, I don't know if you remember, Gerald, or not, but in one of those county meetings when they came in and they started talking about this forest plan, I told Travis in that meeting, we need to have a representative from the county that's on the ground floor of this plan that has a place at the table, because they never want to give you a place at the table. They never want to include you until it's time to get the MOU signed or the collaboration and cooperation in order to make the plan legal. And then they involve you in the public comments on the back side of it just to get your signature on it so they can stuff it down your throat. Where if you just fully rejected it, then they wouldn't have the legal recourse to implement it.
I don't feel any one of these 4 counties are going to cave to it. I think they're gonna stand and make it right.
I know, but then all of a sudden we're negotiating, well, not this part of the wilderness, but we'll do this little chunk of it over here, and you know, and then all of a sudden you begin the negotiations again on a plan that I don't think works to begin with, you know? I mean, that's why you don't negotiate with the terrorists, you know? I mean, because they're, unfortunately, I feel like the Forest Service is just hell-bent on destroying us, you know? I mean, look what they've done to us over the last 20, 30 years. You know, they have shut all of our access down to our forests and taken our jobs away from us, and it's because we keep trying to work with them. And, you know, they need to work for us. Really, the federal government shouldn't have any business managing the lands inside this county anyways, I don't think, but that's a whole nother story. But I mean, we could at least, you know, you could research it and see, does the Forest Service have to have an MOU in place? In order for the plan to be legally implemented? Do they have to have collaboration or cooperation with the local? They do an EIS, you know, environmental impact study. There has to be, they have to have collaboration with the county in order to make this plan legal.
They have
And
to
if they
collaborate,
don't,
but if they, so we already have the position that they haven't collaborated with us so far on it. So that is established, that exists. But now they are asking for input, and if we choose not to, a court would say, well, you had your opportunity. I could see a court doing that easily. I could be naive. It seems like in this revision process, they're open to as many changes as we can provide them concrete info on. What they're wanting is give us examples of why it doesn't fit the definition or why you're against this, and examples that, hey, there's utility lines here, not just that we disagree with it on principle. So I think there's opportunity there. I cannot see any past record of where we actually tried to send a representative to work with them. I don't know what happened in those meetings, but did we follow up? Did anyone go and actually try?
I don't know, but if there's certain things that they have to have in place, like an MOU and collaboration and this and that, and we say, no, we're not going to collaborate because we believe the plan is going to hurt the safety and well-being and the prosperity of the people that we've taken an oath to defend, to represent. So we say, no, we're not going to collaborate. And then they say, oh, well, we've given you an opportunity to. We could say, no, we gave you a letter fully rejecting the plan from its inception. And then if they try to move forward with the plan without collaboration from the county, then we sue them. You know, I mean, we sue them for trying to implement an illegal forest plan. You know, I think that there's legal recourses there that could be explored, and it could be a much stronger position to fight from than to go sit down at the Forest Service with them and sit down at a table with them and start reviewing their plan. And that's just going to be, it's just going to lead to a path where we're going to wind up having to get something stuffed down our throat that's going to hurt our ranchers and our loggers. I mean, we could put our foot down and we could say, no, we reject it. Bye. Come back with something better that works for the people of Otero County and doesn't serve the environmentalist agenda of Washington, D.C., because that's exactly what this plan right here is doing.
I think we've got an opportunity here to work with 3 other counties besides us that want the same thing we do. So I still think we need a seat at the table.
Okay, and
tell
my
'em
position is
what we want.
position is that we reject it, and we tell them to come back with a better plan. But y'all, I mean, that's my position though. My position is to fight them. My position is to reject it. But if you want to go be a liaison or have a liaison, go sit down with the Forest Service, and I guess if Gerald, if you support that, then that's the direction that you and Vicki can go. But I won't be a part of it. I'm not going to be a part of negotiating with the Forest Service that wants to destroy the livelihoods of the ranchers up on the mountain. I'm not going to support that.
I don't think the 4 counties or all the counties are wanting to accept it. They're wanting to reject it and make it right. I just really feel we're going to have more power with more counties than one county.
I do too.
Well, if you think that their position is to reject it, we could start right here, but
But I think they need to get together and come in as one team.
Okay.
And come in there with one full force and do it.
okay, well,
Might be,
yeah.
that's the direction I'm going.
Sure.
Ms. Byfield seemed to be on board with this approach this morning, and she certainly knows far more about the strategy for fighting this than I do. And so if that's her lead, I would take that as an indication that it's a good opportunity.
All right. We don't need to vote on this, right?
No, that's a recommendation. Well, whether or not we want to join both forces or not, we have to.
Yeah. Well, I'm in favor.
No, is there a vote on the agenda? I mean, no, what do we vote, what are we voting on?
Well, you just have to decide whether or not we're going to join forces with the other counties to go against this, and have RB work with that,
Margaret?
yes, the attorney lady.
Mm-hmm.
Does this need to be put on the agenda for this coming month to decide?
I think that probably would be the better course to take, is to put it on the agenda and appoint RB.
It's not on here to
You
vote
can-
right now.
No, right
Yeah,
now,
but-
we don't have an action item on the agenda. Right
In the
now,
next
just to
meeting, we'll
discuss.
y'all can designate a liaison to go represent Otero County to the Forest Service with the other counties.
Okay. You guys have anything else?
Mm-mm.
All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.